Hello and welcome to all. It's 5 o'clock, but we'll let folks trickle in for a couple more minutes, and we'll start with you quite soon. All right, we're gonna kick it off. My name is Olevi Soto. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Harvard Divinity School. Thank you to all of you who have decided to join us for today as a great event, being LGBTQIA+ at HDS. We have a great panel ahead for you, great folks who are gonna give you a sense as to, part of our community our community is very multifaceted. We're going to be talking about this part of our community as well. So we're going to be starting actually with more of the admissions component, just to give you a sense to set the table as to what you can expect from us as a community. And then we're going to have our Assistant Dean for Student Affairs, Steph Gaucho, ask some questions of our panelists. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation now. And just want to give you a sense, I'll talk for about 10 to 12 minutes of what we're about. So we are a unique divinity school in the sense that we really emphasize combining our ethical leadership training with really intellectually rigorous academic work. So what you'll find here is both scholarship religion and religious practitioners who are really involved within the HDS community, within the Harvard community, but also within the larger greater Boston community, and even internationally, as you might hear about in different contexts, whether through field ed or just the sort of leadership and ministry that's offered online. And then the other thing is that we're not just Harvard Divinity School, we're part of a larger One Harvard idea. The fact that we belong to a great institution in which, again, interdisciplinary approaches to a lot of questions are really prioritized. So that's what we stand for. Now, this is what we look like. This is just fresh off the press from a couple of weeks ago when we had our enrolling students. This is what we look like. We have 90 students who are coming in for the MTS, 44 the MDiv, and 1 for the THM. You'll see our age range. Our average age is 25. We have a lot of religious diversity, over 30 different traditions, and those that belong to none are represented here. 36% are students of color, and just 1 in 7 are international students. Germane to our topic today, you'll see that 16% of our students identify as non-binary as well. So there's a great representation of this part of the community as well. Let me give you a quick overview of what our Master of Divinity is about. You'll see it's a 3-year program, and there are a few required courses that everyone sort of walks through together, 2 units of field ed, and 1 language requirement. And this sort of program really prepares you for chaplaincy, but also ministry writ large. So it's really an incredible program for those that definitely want to go into ministry, but ministry as it evolves in different components, in different traditions, and in different fields. So that's the Master of Divinity. The MTS is a little bit different. You'll have the same intellectual preparation that you would get with the MDiv, but there's a little bit more focus at times, whether through the areas of focus from dealing with religion and culture and literature to religion, ethics, and politics. And it really exposes you to a lot of, again, the interdisciplinary approach that we talked about. A lot of our students definitely consider academic work, but they also consider, going into law, going into nonprofit advocacy, you name it. The THM. The THM is a little bit different. And this is for students who already have a Master of Divinity and who want to take a break and sort of retool, go back to school and really think through what they're looking for to make their jobs easier, or their new ministry, or really redirecting their energy towards something else. And again, this is a 1-year program, 18 areas of focus, just like the Master of Theological Studies. One difference about this program is that it does not come with financial aid, while the other 2 offer both need-based and merit-based aid. Again, you're gonna hear from our great students, and you're gonna get to meet a couple of us as faculty, as staff members. But our faculty are the backbone of our institution, of course, and that whether the mentorship, the guidance, the intellectual transfer, it's definitely there. And this is Dean Hampton in the front in that baby blue gown, beautiful baby blue. Blue is my favorite color. And then surrounded by a sea of beautiful faces. Something else I want to talk about is that the interactions with faculty, the intellectual work goes beyond the classroom. You'll see that there are these centers. I'm not going to name them all, but they give you a sense as to what sort of, again, intellectual wrestling you're doing outside the classroom, the co-curricular aspect of Harvard. The curriculum offers you an opportunity to really craft your experience. Again, because you might be quite aware as to what you want to do it afterward, or you might not, and that's okay. There's a lot of flexibility to really think through how you might want to combine traditions or just sort of tools to create your own space, whether in ministry or academia or nonprofit advocacy, education, you name it. Again, I had mentioned sort of the access to the whole university, but there's also access to the Boston Theological Interreligious Consortium. That's a really interesting tool as well, because it gives you then exposure to all these different divinity schools and seminaries around the area. So it really broadens your reach in many ways as well. Student leadership. It's going to be exhibited today in our panel. You'll see it in action. But the students, at the end, I mean, this is the flesh and blood that really sort of makes the campus hum. So a lot of student-led events, a lot of diversity and cross-sectionality of viewpoints in student organizations, and a lot of workshops, a lot of opportunities for you to, again, gain that social capital that comes outside the classroom as well. So in many ways, you might be coming for the faculty and the resources, but you're staying for the community. And that community usually consists of your fellow peers as well. Again, student life component, great. If you like writing, this might be a good place for you. A lot of opportunities to write and edit, a lot of editing, but also a lot of opportunities to get together and really learn from those moments, very small moments of either sharing tea together or participating in a news service in which you're exposed to a different religious tradition. A lot of opportunities to learn and grow with each other. Again, One Harvard. This is an overriding idea that says, hey, we are one community and we are here to really learn from each other and benefit each other. So that means that if there's a group that is not found at the Harvard Divinity School, but is found at the Harvard Business School, you should go and join that affinity group. That's part of your university experience here as well. One fact that we're really proud of is that 90% of our students receive financial aid. We are extremely generous. We think it's important to really set you up financially so that you have success after you leave HDS as well. And I mean, we're proud of the fact that the least you can get in tuition grant is 75%. So it's really a good opportunity to, again, not be worried so much about funding. And you'll see we even have a 100% tuition grant and also 100% plus a stipend. We also have merit awards. That's another component. There are some scholarships that are either Divinity School based or Harvard wide based, in which we're able to distribute to top excellent students. So that's another way in which we really try to make the experience as affordable for you as possible. And then sort of nuts and bolts about the application. We just launched the application a couple of weeks ago, so we started seeing them come in. We're excited to start reading them. We're going to be open for business, receiving applications until January 7th, and then you'll see the timeline here. We're going to start sending information about financial aid in mid-January, and in February, you'll start. February and March is a lot of financial aid information for you to fill out, which we encourage you to. And then by mid-March, we want to send you our decisions, and we hope that if you're admitted, that you join us. So that is my 12-minute admission spiel. I am going to be receding into the background now because now it's an opportunity for you to see in action what this recruiting actually means. Recruiting great students and actually bringing them on campus. So I'm going to turn it over right now. I forgot I had that last slide. I apologize for that. We have, you'll see what we require. The application fee of $25 and the transcripts, the 3 letters of recommendation, and a writing sample. This is, again, where you get to tell us your story. Where we really get to see as to why you think you're a good fit for Harvard Divinity School now. And we hope you stay connected with us. We have a lot of other events coming up. We have a great blog in which you actually might get to see some of our panelists being featured. And we have a lot of good information on the website. So we encourage you to stay tuned with that, but also to reach out to us if you have any questions. I had jumped the gun about 2 slides ago, but this is where I thought we were going. And I'm going to ask Steph and the panelists now to actually turn their videos on so we can see them. And also start unmuting themselves. And I am going to be muting myself now.
Perfect. Thank you, Davies. It's great to be with everyone this evening. I'm Steph Gauschel. I'm the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs at HDS. We use here they pronouns. My role is really support for students. I'm a primary support, medical, academic, personal need. I also work with students around identity-based issues. I'm also trans-identified and identify as a transracial adoptee with white passing privilege. And I'm really just excited to have this panel and be here with students. One thing I just want to note right off is that LGBTQIA is certainly does not cover every identity. It is not one identity. So, it's the umbrella term we're using with the understanding that there are many identities and many experiences around those identities. And today you'll get a chance to hear from a few of our current students about their experiences specific to LGBTQIA queer issues, experiences at Harvard. So the way it'll work, I'm gonna have each of our students introduce themselves in whatever way you feel comfortable. And then after that, we have 3 rounds of questions, really kind of getting at the heart of your experiences. And you'll each have an opportunity to respond to that. And I'm just gonna see, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go in the order of folks. So Sarah, you're first, and I will just try to spotlight you. And there we go, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steph, for that introduction. And thank you to the admissions office for hosting this really terrific and vital panel. My name is Sarah. I take the She series, and as the slide briefly mentioned, I'm a second-year MTS student at HDS with dual focuses in religion, literature, and culture, and religion, ethics, and politics. Regarding queer identities, I identify as lesbian, and I also serve on the leadership board for Queer Rights, which is an organization at HDS that cultivates community among queer students. So I'll go ahead and pass the introductory mic and drop information about Queer Rights in the chat to get us started. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And John O'Connor, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Hi, everyone. My name is John O'Connor. Welcome and thank you, Steph. I am a second-year MDiv student and I take the He series. I have an interest in early Christianity and Buddhism, and I welcome you all to this panel.
Wonderful, thank you. And let's see if I can switch. And Matt, you're next. So I'm just gonna switch over. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Matthew. Everyone calls me Matt though. I use the he series pronouns as well. I am a second-year MTS student with a focus in women, gender, and religion. I am transgender, I am pansexual, and I am polyamorous. And I'm looking forward to talking about my experiences here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Nadia, let's see if I can do the spotlight. Here we go. Please feel free to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes. Welcome. I want to first say thank you to the admissions office at HDS for even having me. It's quite an honor. I am Nadia Miled Isa. I am Afro-Dominican and Lebanese. I use they, them pronouns only. I am gender fluid and non-binary. Very, very queer. I'm a first year Master of Theological Studies student, and I am in the African and African-American Religious Studies area of focus. I am also a current research associate at the Pluralism Project, where I'm contributing my research experiences in Afro-Caribbean spiritual religious traditions.
Wonderful, thank you, Nadia. And last but not least, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan G. My pronouns are also Jonathan. I am a second-year MTS student. I concentrate in gender and sexuality, and I identify as gay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So we'll go back to the same order. Let me just see if I can unhighlight. And the first question I posed to you all through email, if you could speak to people on the call about what has been positive regarding LGBTQ plus identities and issues while at HDS. And let me get back to Sarah. There we go.
Yeah, thanks, Steph, for that question. I would echo the opening sentiment of come for the faculty and stay for the community. I think so far the vast majority of the positive experiences that I've had at HDS regarding my own queerness and queer identified students is the students themselves. There is sort of a running joke, I think, in the broader Cambridge community that everyone at HDS is queer, which brings me a lot of joy and really warms my heart to hear. One time in Somerville, I was helping a gentleman find our local polling place, and we were chatting about our professions. And I mentioned that I went to HDS, and he was like, "Oh, it's really queer over there, right? And so I just, you know, of course, take tremendous pride and honor in sort of having that reputation in the community. So all that to say that it's absolutely true that, you know, we all come for the academic and intellectual and professional resources and stay for the relationships that we make with each other. I think there's a really large, vibrant, loving, caring, queer community at HDS, for which I'm very thankful.
Wonderful, thank you. And it looks like it switched order a little bit, but Matt, you are up next, if that's all right.
Yep, that's totally fine. I can do whatever order you feel feel works. Yeah. So I personally, within my like program of study, we talk about like queer stuff a lot. You know, being in women, gender, and sexuality and religion. And I really enjoy the class space as like a way to like think about these things, but also to workshop new ideas and ways that we're like conceptualizing our identities and reading this into our work. And one of the things that I think is really amazing is just the openness of students to have these conversations with us about queer identity, even if they themselves aren't queer. And I always like hearing that kind of perspective too. And those conversations happening in a really respectful way and being facilitated in a really respectful way is something that I've always really enjoyed about the Harvard community. And that's been across my classes, even ones that aren't focused necessarily on queer issues. I also, I've got a lot of respect from staff, particularly also within Harvard University Health Services. One of my things I was really like nervous about when I was coming here was transitioning, I guess, from my previous trans healthcare provider to a new one. But I was able to do that seamlessly. I got set up with someone who I felt really understood my needs and respected the way I've been doing things. So that was really refreshing and a big weight off my shoulders.
Awesome, thank you very much. I forgot to mention that at the end we'll do answers. So if folks have questions, feel free to write those in the Q&A and I'll read them at the end. We also are trying to figure out chat to post the information about queer rights. I'm wondering, I'm not seeing a way.
I was able to answer it in the Q&A stuff. Thanks, though.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. All right, Nadia, would you mind going next? And if you need me to repeat the question, just let me know.
You're good. So yeah, in much of resonance with Matt regarding the openness of students, I really had that experience during my very short time, right? I'm a first year, so I want to kind of speak more about the summer language program at Harvard Divinity School, and I participated in the theological Spanish course. And there, it's heavy translation work, and we're talking about creation stories from multiple spiritual and religious traditions. And so we really got to engage in the responsibility of translation, and we ran into a lot of critique and analysis on gender, right? So a lot of folks, you know, we were adamant, or we were exploring, you know, how much agency are we giving to the translator, but we want to change man or mankind to people or folks, like what happens to the text in that way. And so I really got to disrupt that. I use gender neutral spelling, and that was not something that was penalized nor criticized. It was rather welcomed and refreshed. And I think that analysis was carried out throughout the whole course, whether it was a Maya creation story, if it's Genesis 2, a lot of folks really took onto the call of making these creation stories more relatable, right? More neutral. And so I think those are one of the experiences that I felt very lucky to be. I feel like that not every course would have that space, but certainly in that SLP course, we got to really queer it up in terms of the divinity and the cosmos and deities and land. We really got to hone into that and choose to kind of have more reflective language around that.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And Jonathan, would you mind going next?
Yeah, so I concentrate in gender and sexuality, and I have a very complicated relationship with religion, especially being a queer person and being kicked out of a lot of Christian communities growing up before divinity school. And so I found that most of my classes weren't, I took a lot of Christian classes and I felt like it wasn't what I was looking for. And so I had the honor and privilege of working with Professor Mark Jordan, who is a gender and sexuality, queer, and Christian theology professor. And we worked on an independent study together where I had a chance to talk to him and research with him about like what it means to create my own ministry and my own faith tradition that is unique to myself and my sexuality. And I think that the divinity school, especially HDS, has a lot of provides this like foundation for like these types of research and discussions to happen within I don't know, the divinity schools. And yeah,
That's great, thank you. And last, John, would you mind going?
Sure, everyone. I've neglected to mention that I identify as gay, so I wanted to throw that out so you make sure that you know I'm in the right room. And my observations about positive experience would be first and foremost to contrast it with my previous grad school experience. I went to law school back in the 1980s. And when I was doing so, the State Department would be on campus interviewing. And we were told that we couldn't let them know that we were gay because at that time, the State Department was weeding gay people out of the service. So I contrast that with my experience at Harvard Divinity School now. And the first word that comes to mind is just joy. There is an immense amount of joy in the community at Harvard Divinity School. And that extends to a very diverse group, including all of us. And it is a joy to go into class and to hear your professor mention offhand, oh, I was with my husband. And it's like, oh, okay, that just slipped out. How interesting. No one even notices. No one even cares. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's also great to see the diversity of our community so well represented on campus, in classrooms, in the discussions, in the topics that come up. And it really is a welcoming place to be. And yeah, those are my initial impressions on a positive experience at HDS.
Thanks so much. All right, and now we'll move on to the second question, which is really just sort of the other end. If you could speak to any experiences that were challenging related to LGBTQI plus identity or issues. And Sarah, I will start with you again.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. I would say that, you know, for an institution like Harvard, coming in to do master's level, you know, graduate level work here, my expectations of faculty, staff, and administrators were very, very high in many senses. And I was encouraged to have high expectations throughout the admissions process, which I really value. I will say that the majority of the time those expectations were met. However, I will, you know, add the caveat that there certainly were experiences that I had in classrooms or in conversations with staff or administrators that did not meet my expectations. So the caveat that I would suggest to all of the really positive things that I and others have shared is that there's a really wide variety of comfort in engaging with queer issues in faculty, staff, and administrators. I would say for the most part, faculty are really great at integrating queer scholarship and queer perspectives into their syllabi, but this is not always the case. It's been rare that I have encountered open hostility to queer perspectives. However, it has happened in the classroom. And I think that's worth saying that, you know, no institution is immune, certainly not an institution like Harvard, and unfortunately not a place like HDS. So again, you know, as a balance to that feedback, I would counter with understanding that your community of classmates and colleagues and students is really vibrant and supportive and wonderful. And I certainly had many people to commiserate with when things like this occurred. But it does happen, and I think that faculty, staff, and administrators would probably benefit from some sort of level setting training or, you know, just an opportunity to engage with each other on where their gaps in knowledge or comfort might be when it comes to issues of queerness or of non-normative gender identities.
Excellent, thank you very much. And let's see, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. Jonathan, can I have you go next?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I came to HCS right out of college, and I have a degree in queer theory. And so most of my department was this very queer space. And I think when I came to Harvard, I was expecting the same. But I think that because it was a divinity school, there was a lot of different expectations as a queer scholar. Therefore, I did encounter a couple students and professors who were uncomfortable with my idea of religion because it was something that they were unfamiliar with, which eventually led me to Professor Mark Jordan, where we got to create this independent study research. But I think that compared to my undergrad, something that was challenging for me was getting used to not having a space that was solely focused on queer research. And instead, there were a couple handful of professors, which was something new for me.
Thank you. Oh, and Nadia, can I have you go next?
Yeah, for sure.
I
So,
accidentally stopped your video. 1 second.
oh no.
I don't know how to restart it.
Oh no.
There we go.
All right. Do you see me?
Sorry, I do. I'm sorry about that.
You're so good stuff. Thank you. I want to speak a little bit about perhaps student associations. Right now, again, just starting my degree, but right now I find myself in a couple student associations, and it kind of feels like I'm filling in gaps of community, but very much in silos, just to be quite honest, right? So I'm in Harambe, but also in the Latinx Student Association. And so it just feels a little bit separate, right? I feel like there's a lot of layers, and I know that my experience as a Black person who's queer is going to be a little more nuanced and layered if I were to join, let's say, queer rights, which I'm glad they exist, but I feel like there needs to be certain student associations to tend to that. And there's certainly, like Odevis pointed out, POC or Black and Brown queer student associations like the one at the Harvard Law School. But then again, it's engaging with another community, and Harvard's so large, right? That means that I would be engaging with folks who are practicing law, and I'm in divinity. So it's just, you know, but there is that platform to start your own student association. And this kind of community building also happens informally, right? And so not to say that it's not there, but formally, it hasn't been there at HDS, but it absolutely has the potential. So that's kind of the back and forth. And to what Sarah spoke to, curricula, I feel like it could be more inviting of those queer analysis, of queer scholarship, of queer folks, especially when it comes to different cosmologies that are very queer, but is not really mentioned. So those are kind of my two tensions right now, but nothing that quite hinders my hope or my inability to build community at all.
Thank you very much, Nadia. John, how about you? Would you mind going next?
Sure, no problem. I don't have a negative experience to recount, but I do have a challenging one. And the challenge is that at Harvard, the student population comes from such a diverse background, different religious traditions and different geographies, different places throughout the world. And so when we all come into class, we bring with us a lot of our preconceived ideas and notions about, you know, what is society and how is it formed. And as a queer person, you know, who's been working this for a long time, it's like I have a certain expectation of, oh, we have a common language, we have a common understanding of what we're talking about. And sometimes you will come up against an issue in class where you're dealing with someone who comes from a radically different background and culture and doesn't even really have the language or sort of the cultural background to understand what you're talking about. And those can come across as being, ooh, this is sort of like anti-gay or something like that. And it's not. And these opportunities are opportunities to, you know, explore differences with one another and to explain, oh, well, this is where I'm coming from, rather than to take it as an insult or a put down or a shutdown or something like that. So you definitely can run into these instances where you're almost not like speaking the same language, and it's like, whew, what just happened? So you do run into those, and just look at them as opportunities to, to teach, to learn. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much. And Matt.
So I'd like to talk to an issue that's not necessarily about queer identity, but an issue that disproportionately affects queer people, and that is mental health. Because queer people are more likely, double as likely to face mental health struggles than non-queer people. And every university has their own way of dealing with the mental health care of students. And I just personally, when I first came here, I had a lot of trouble navigating that space. And the expectation that I had wasn't necessarily met. And it certainly wasn't met in a timely manner. And so that was like something that I want everybody who's like facing that to be aware of, and seek help as quickly as you can with people like Steph. Steph helped me a lot when I was having trouble navigating this space, like organize my like thoughts and my possibilities, and like where can I go if I can't get an appointment for, let's say, 3 months. And so I just like, I wish that space was dealt with a little better. And that's something that, everybody has their own way of approaching. But other than that, I don't think that I've had a lot of the same experiences as my fellow panelists. A lot of my classes, my classrooms have been very like radically queer friendly. And that could just be the classrooms that I'm passing through, but I'm definitely aware that these are problems that are happening in the university. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Matt. I feel like these are the moments where the Zoom format feels like I wish we were in a room so we could see each other. So I just want to validate what you all have shared, and just think it's so important for anyone who's considering coming to HDS that they have a real sense of, what some of the students' experiences are. The positive, the challenging, so everyone can make informed decisions. So I'm really grateful for your honesty about your experiences. The last question before we get into hopefully questions from the people anyone on the call, is if there's been any surprises, like has anything surprised you about LGBTQI issues, identities since you've been at Harvard or HDS specifically? And Sarah, I'll go back to you to start us off.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Steph. I would say a positive surprise has been, exactly the counterbalance of what I shared previously would be the professors who come right out of the gate on day one and understand that it's crucial to their pedagogy to include queer theory and queer perspectives on their subject matter. That's both intellectually very refreshing and personally delightful. And I really enjoy those moments when professors, regardless of their personal orientation or identities or, quote unquote stake, I would say we all have stakes in this, but regardless of their quote unquote stakes, maybe more visible stakes, are very willing and eager to engage those perspectives. So that's just lovely and a real gift. I would say a less positive surprise, just to echo Nadia, is that siloing is absolutely an issue. And this is less of an explicit queer issue, but just a community-wide issue that Harvard is very large. And I will say personally, I feel like it has taken me the full first year of my program to develop enough institutional literacy to navigate it. And that was something that I really struggled with as a first year student, was finding community in the first place. So it's there, and once you find it, it's terrific, but it can be really difficult to get to that point. So those are my two surprises thus far.
Wonderful, thank you very much. John, I'm gonna go to you if that's all right.
Sure. A pleasant surprise is one of the community events that we have where everyone at Harvard Divinity has an opportunity to come together is what we call noon service on Wednesdays, which is at noon. And it is a service which is put on each week by a different group within Harvard Divinity School. Sometimes it's a religious denomination, but we also have queer rights. And they are one of the groups that goes and puts together a service for noon service. And what a great community that lifts up the group Queer Rights and affords us the opportunity to put together a service for the entire divinity school to participate in. So that is a great and pleasant surprise, just to see ourselves lifted up in front of the entire community and made part of the community and celebrated by the community. So that's my positive note.
Thank you very much. And Jonathan.
Yeah, I guess I want to share that a surprise about being a part of HDS is that the Boston community knows a lot about HDS and I think expects a lot from their students. And so while I don't particularly abide by any, I guess, the Christian tradition, I actually am a minister and was asked by the community at Metropolitan Community Churches to preach for them once a month. So I think that was like a kind of bit of a surprise for me, because I don't necessarily, I'm not a preacher, I'm not very religious, and my research mostly focuses on like how to create your own religion, but I think this Christian community really valued HDS students, which I think was very interesting to me.
That's cool, thank you. And Matt.
So one of my great surprises and one of my favorite things about my experience at HDS so far has been the workshopping of these kinds of ideas within the classroom. I've had a lot of instances where, you know, professors will present not their their take on something, but their questions about something, and like workshopping and co-creating that like knowledge of like reading queerness into the texts or into the lesson, or expounding on points that are already there and learning together has been something that I didn't necessarily come here expecting, but have really enjoyed being a part of. And having that kind of respect in a classroom, I think, is really important, you know, because we're all here to learn together, and it's not always just us students who are learning things. And it's great to feel like our opinions matter and that people care, and that these are conversations that are not set in stone and are still very much alive and very much happening. And just being part of that kind of environment is really, really enjoyable and really affirming.
Thank you very much. And Nadia.
Yes, I want to take it back to summer language program, theological Spanish. You could tell how much I loved the course, honestly, by Professor Eileen O'Connor and Lana Neufeld. It was just amazing, amazing class. I was quite surprised when Professor O'Connor reached out to me to actually present about an Afro-Cuban religious tradition called Regla de Ochaifa. And this is because we looked at sacred stories of Regla de Ochaifa. And so I was, you know, asked to present as an initiated priestess and a scholar that focuses on Regla de Ochaifa. I felt like I was given that space. Really, I had like 30 minutes or so, really just talking about this tradition that I love, so that other folks can really give respectful considerations in the ways that they're going to go about translating these sacred stories. And here I was able to talk about my practice, but the queer elements and realities within Regla de Ochaifa, which is something not really talked about in a theory course, but I was really able to not only provide a good sense and foundation of Regla de Ochaifa, but I got to delve in and point out the queer elements and realities that happens in that tradition. So that was an amazing surprise, that it only affirmed me. You know, I'm aware that I'm probably one of very few who are focusing on this Afro-Caribbean tradition. So it means the world that I was given that space.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like all of you have really kind of highlighted just the the endless ways in which there's diversity at HDS in terms of positionality, in terms of academic, personal interests, in terms of faith traditions, and you're just five of our, five of the students. And a lot of what you said resonated with me in terms of being in a pluralistic community that's also small. There's a lot of beauty in that in terms of having conversations across difference. It also can be a little isolating. It can be harder to find groups. And so I appreciate all the positives and challenges that you raised. I am going to take a peek and see if we've got some questions. I know there was one that I think I accidentally closed out. So the question that came in, I only considered applying to a theology program after I started to reconcile my Christian faith and my sexuality. Now that's the main motivation for me to apply. But since I don't feel called to ordained ministry, I'm not sure if I'd be a good fit for HDS. How common is it for LGBTQ plus people to get a degree, say an MTS, without seeking ordination later? Would anyone like to respond to that? I'm happy to say lots of people don't do ordination. So I think it's probably more about what you're hoping to study. And but are there folks who are not on the ordination track who wouldn't maybe mind sharing a little bit about, yeah, Matt, I see your hand.
I saw John first, so if John wants to go ahead and speak to it.
I couldn't see him. Please go ahead.
No, I happen to be ordination track, but that doesn't mean you have to be at HDS. I know plenty of people from my past who are friends with me, and some of them have corporate positions. Some of them are, they're writers, they're working for nonprofits. Ordination is not a necessity for studying at HDS at all.
Matt, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm not on the ordination track at all. I'm a neo-pagan, so we don't really necessarily have any formal institutions, at least none that are universal. So that's not even really an option for me, even if I decided like later on. But I think that a really important aspect of a theological education is not necessarily what you're studying, even though that's really important, but it's how you're studying and how you're thinking about these things. And I think that engaging with theological materials and asking these larger questions about what it means to be a human being today and what historically it has meant really helps us orient ourselves and our place in the world, and really is helpful to inform any number of different careers, as John was kind of talking about. And I know for me personally, I would love to be a professor, but I've seen a lot of different possibilities for where I could take my education. And that's something that's kind of ever changing as I am here and discovering new interests of mine.
Awesome, thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to validate that question, because that was the question of like why I came to the divinity school as well. Like coming from a line of like 5 pastors in my family generation and being gay, like I wrestled a lot with like my sexuality and my Christian identity. But I would say that outside of like my academic research, which kind of like highlights my frustrations with Christian theology, there's a lot of resources that I found at HDS, including I talked to a lot of the chaplains about these issues, and I found a lot of gay Boston pastors who I also talked a lot about these issues. And so I thought I would spend like the 2 years getting this degree just to like explore like how I wanted to be in the world. And so, yeah.
Wonderful. Any other comments?
Yeah, I also want to echo and say that I'm also not on the ordination track. I applied to Harvard and let them know that I'm already an initiated priestess. So really that understanding of where I'm coming from and you know, that space that I still get to have in theological studies in the MTS program, right? Because we're all coming from different traditions. And if you're coming from a tradition that doesn't have an institutional ordination right, there's still a place for you here at HDS, most certainly.
Wonderful, thank you. We did have 2 other questions come in. The first one is, I'm a theater major and typically work with folks behind the scenes. I'm interested in chaplaincy for people who work backstage in the entertainment arts. Would anyone be able to speak to experience in focusing on chaplaincy, pastoral care at HDS? If I'm not seeing your hand, feel free to jump in.
I can jump in a little bit, not theater specific, but towards chaplaincy in general. As part of the field education, we have an opportunity to, work as intern chaplains, and I'm one of 3 intern chaplains at Harvard Divinity School this year. So that gives me an opportunity to work with our chaplain, Kerry, at HDS, and to sort of hone those skills of chaplaincy and ministry, and learn how to engage with the community that we're in. So for me in particular, it happens to be Harvard, but that skill set would be transferable to, say, a theater community, as it would be to a prison, as it would be into a hospital. So the idea of chaplaincy is there are many avenues into it at HDS. And if it's the realm of theater that's of interest to you, I would encourage you to go ahead and pursue that as well. You can do student initiated field education classes. And if you were with a particular theater troupe or had something identified, you could put together a proposal for a student initiated field education. And that would probably be a really rewarding experience.
Really helpful, thank you. And I'd say just sort of broadly for anyone who's on the call, that use admissions, reach out to folks to help with your discernment process. And the question made me think of 2, I've known students who have really seen music as their form of ministry. So that was something new to me coming to HDS. And a few years ago, there was a couple of students who did a lot of work around, I think it was looking at like CrossFit or like organizations that served as more spiritual spaces, or so I think part of what's really amazing about HDS is just how broad and interesting the questions are that students can bring. So it might require a little more maneuvering, or as John was saying, creations of things, but it doesn't sound like an impossibility to me. Does anyone else have anything to add on that question? Okay, let's see. So we have a question. Sorry, I missed it. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. I'm interested in the MDiv track, and I'm wondering if there are field work opportunities through HDS that specifically engage with queer and trans individuals, communities, organizations. Any of our panelists? Sarah.
Yeah, I can just underscore what John mentioned briefly earlier, which is that as an MDiv student, you'll be doing field education placement. And I was really excited and energized to find how open-ended that opportunity is, and how willing OMS is to support you in whatever your particular interests might be. I just recently completed a self-designed field education placement. It was an organization that I found that I already had a relationship with. It was very easy for me to make connections between that organization's work and my academic interests. So I would really encourage you to reach out to OMS and talk to them. From my understanding, the sky is pretty much the limit as far as what you can imagine, and the ways in which you can highlight relationships between your field ed and your academic interests. So even if it doesn't exist yet, kind of as Nadia was saying earlier, there's a lot that doesn't exist yet, but that doesn't mean it can't be created.
Thank you, Sarah. And the next, oh, John, yes, please.
Yeah, I would also point, there's plenty of organizations in Boston that are very queer oriented, and I'm thinking of, say, example of Fenway Community Health. So, I mean, they have, they're a great community health service provider. They do a lot of, testing of all kinds of different new protocols and things like that. They have great support groups, mental health. and they are weaved in with all the teaching hospitals that we have here in Boston. So, you know, through that sort of queer community, through Fenway Community Health, you could almost create any sort of a position to bring that to bear on your field education.
That's a really great point. There really is so much in the Boston, Cambridge area, different nonprofits and opportunities. The next question, this isn't specifically a queer question, but can you talk a little about what the schedule usually looks like? I currently live in Southern Maine with my husband. Does anyone have any experience commuting or setting their schedule to allow for splitting time between the two locations? Don't see any panelists, but I can speak. I've definitely known students who have lived in New Hampshire or lived in Western Mass within an hour or two drive, even just, you know, as you probably know, within this, if you lived in Jamaica Plain, it could take you 2 hours to get to Cambridge. So it's certainly possible, and living in this area is certainly a consideration that students need to think about in coming. So I imagine also living where you're at would be a cheaper option than coming here. It's definitely not.
It looks like Steph might be frozen.
I think we've lost him.
Okay. Let me, you know, with so much, you know, so many people on the internet, I think sometimes Wi-Fi networks get overloaded. Let me continue. Absolutely. I've known people that can commute in from all sorts of places. I mean, the majority of people do live nearby, or, you know, they either take the subway, the T, as it's called around here, or they'll bike in, or they'll just walk in. I mean, there's a whole community, a whole economy based on student turnover. So I suspect that most of you probably live nearby, but I have known people, you know, especially if they have families or they have pets, you know, they need a little bit more space. It's done. I think we have Steph back. Hi, Steph.
Sorry about that. My
No
internet
problem.
totally dropped out.
I just tried to continue your train of thought, but please jump back in.
I honestly, I don't know where I got cut off, but I was saying I believe there is a technical answer to that question, but I don't remember offhand what the percentage is that students can take. But I do think it's a high percentage. Don't quote me, but I really want to say it's like up to six classes, but that might just be for MDivs. I honestly, admissions can help. We can always answer questions offline. All right, I think that's it on questions.
Actually, let me jump in with the independent studies for a second. Just
sure.
answering also the commuting question from before.
Oh, thank you.
The independent studies, actually the registrar's office, usually I think the one that will work with you. In many ways, if you're taking half of your courses already outside the Kennedy School, law school, business school, wherever it is, chances are you might be tight in also having to complete the requirements for the MTS or the MDiv. So it's probably going to be one or the other, either independent studies or half of your courses outside of HDS. But I've known students to do at least 3 or 4. But I haven't heard more than that, because usually there's a course out there for you. Honestly, you know, we offer over 200. And in total, there are a couple of thousand courses in the whole university. So chances are you're probably going to find something that you're going to enjoy. I'll tell you, one of my favorite classes at Harvard Divinity School took place on a Friday afternoon, and it was a professor, another student, and me. Boy, did we get to know each other quite well. But there was enough interest in at least 3 of us having a conversation, you know, instead of just a professor and me. So again, there's something out there for you, most likely.
Thank you very much, Davies. Does anyone have a last comment or anything that came up for you that you really want to share before we wrap up? Well, I'm very thankful for your time and for sharing of your experience. And for those of you joining us, please feel free to reach out to me if I can be of any help, or around queer pieces, class pieces. And I'll turn it back over to you, Davies.
Well, thank you, Steph. Thank you, Sarah, John, Nadia, Jonathan, and Matt. And thank you, Sarah, whom you also see at different box. That's Sarah Guzzi, also works in the admissions office with us. Thank you for your time with us. Thank you for your questions. Stay tuned for all the different events we're going to be having. We are going to be having a virtual open house in a month's time, actually, on October 28th. We're going to be putting things, a lot of asynchronous events already up on the website a couple of weeks beforehand and afterward, if in case you can't join us the day of. But again, we think, obviously we're all biased. We think this is a great community. We're growing pains like any community out there. But it's a community that really likes to come together and learn from and with each other and love each other and really sort of affirm. So we hope you consider us. And again, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.